You are born in Rogaland, on the western coast of Norway. In a year nobody writes down because nobody in your village writes anything down. Your father is a farmer who keeps 12 sheep in a boat he uses for fishing in the summer. He is not a warrior. He is a careful man who measures the weather before he decides anything. You are not careful. You understand this about yourself before you understand anything else. You are 8 when the Danes raid your village. 2 longships at dawn. They take the grain stores, 3 men, and your father's boat. Your father watches from the tree line where he has pulled you and your mother and your sister. He watches his boat go and says nothing. You watch his face. That silence is the first thing you decide you will never be. You leave Rogaland at 16 with 5 other young men who have the same hunger you have, and no word for it yet. You find a jarl named Sigurd in Vestfold who is assembling a fleet. He asks what you can do. You say you can row, and you can fight. He says everyone says that. He gives you an oar, and waits to see what happens. What happens is that you are very good at this. Not just fighting, the part before fighting. Reading where the danger is coming from before it arrives, knowing when to hold the line and when to break it. Sigurd notices this the way men in his position notice anything useful. He moves you forward, first to the front of the boat, then to the front of the raid, then to the front of his council. If you have ever felt something click into place for the first time and understood that the thing clicking was you, then you already know what the first raid felt like. Stay with it. That is exactly where this story begins. The raids are the coast of Britain first. Lindisfarne, Jarrow, the soft monasteries that have not yet learned what is coming. You are not a man who takes pleasure in cruelty. You understand the difference between a man who fights because he must, and a man who fights because something in him requires it. You are the second kind, and you know it. And for many years this knowledge sits comfortably inside you, the way a blade sits in a well-fitted scabbard. You earn your own ship at 23, 30 oars, a crew you chose yourself. You name her Iskar, which means sharp edge in the dialect of your childhood. The name is accurate. You run her hard, and you run her smart, and in 3 seasons you have enough silver to buy a second ship, and enough reputation to fill both with men who want to sail under you. Sigurd gives you a jarl's title at 26. It is the right decision for him, and you understand that. A man with your reputation either gets a title or he gets a blade in the back before he decides he doesn't need the title anymore. Sigurd is not a man who makes that kind of mistake. You respect him for it. You are given land in Vestfold, a hall, the right to collect taxes from 3 villages, the trappings of a man who has arrived somewhere. You spend 4 days in the hall before you go back to sea. Your wife's name is Astrid, the daughter of a landowner in Telemark, practical and clear-eyed and entirely without illusions about what she is marrying. She runs the hall and the land and the accounts with a competence that makes your occasional presence largely unnecessary. You have 2 sons. The older one, Leif, follows you everywhere on the property when you are home and watches everything you do with a focused attention that mirrors your own at that age. The younger one, Eric, is quiet and reads the weather before he decides anything. He has your father's eyes. You are home for the winters mostly, long dark months when the sea is too violent for raiding. You eat, and you drink, and you sit in your hall, and the walls close in slowly, the way they never do on water. Your men drink themselves into arguments, and you settle the arguments, and by February you are counting days until the ice breaks and the season opens. Astrid watches this. She doesn't say anything for the first several years. Then one winter she sits across from you at the table after the boys are asleep, and she asks you plainly what it is you're looking for out there. You think about it for a long time. You tell her you don't know. She looks at you with the expression she saves for problems she's already decided she cannot solve. She goes to bed. You sit by the fire until the coals go gray. You raid the Seine Valley in your 32nd year. Frankia, rich land, slow to defend. You winter there with a reduced crew, mapping the settlements, learning which towns have walls and which have only prayers. The Frankish king sends envoys twice. Both times you send them back with terms that benefit you entirely. Both times he accepts, which tells you everything you need to know about him. You bring back more silver than from all the British raids combined. Enough to rebuild your hall twice. You distribute the shares fairly, which is why the same men return every season. A crew that trusts your arithmetic follows you further than a crew that fears your sword. A skald in Sigurd's hall composes a verse about the Seine raid. He gives you a name, Ulf Hethon, wolf-coated. Not entirely accurate. You don't fight in a frenzy the way the name implies, but names in this world are given, not chosen, and this one sticks. By 40 you are known from the Orkney Islands to the Loire by a name that describes something you are not quite, and you never correct it because the correction would cost more than it gains. Your first named man dies at Hamwick on a foggy morning in what the Frankish monks record as 847. His name is Bjorn, and he has rowed your first ship since you got it. and he is killed by a Frankish spearman on a dock while the rest of you are already past the walls. You carry him back to the ship yourself. You bury him on a headland overlooking the channel with his weapons and a brooch you take from your own cloak, and you stand there for a while after the others go back to the ships. You don't know exactly what you feel standing there. Something that is not regret exactly. More like a debt you understand you cannot repay and will keep adding to. The list grows. Gunnar at the Thames, Horlaug in the Hebrides, Thorvald, who rode with you since Vestfold, killed at Nantes by a Frankish axe at a treaty meeting that was supposed to be safe. You keep their names in a particular part of your memory that you return to on certain nights the way you return to the headland at Hamwick. Not grief exactly. More like an accounting, a ledger that only ever adds. Leif sails with you for the first time at 15. You don't want him there, and you don't say so because saying so would cost you the thing it's trying to protect. He is good. Better than you were at his age, which is the particular terror of watching your son become you. He is fearless in a way not yet tested properly, and you know what that test looks like, and what it costs. Some nights you lie awake in the ship thinking about it. Not the ceiling closing in. The other kind of fear. The kind that comes from having something to lose. He survives the season. You say nothing to him about it. He was there. He knows. You are 44 when Sigurd dies. Old age, which in his position is itself an achievement. His son Halfdan inherits and looks at you with the expression of a young man who understands that the most useful man in his father's council is also the most dangerous. He offers you an expansion of your territory in Vestfold. A chieftain with more land to manage has less time for the sea. You take the land. You also take 6 more ships that season and come back with enough silver to make Halfdan's generosity look like what it was. He hosts a feast in your honor. You drink his mead and smile at him across the fire, and neither of you says what you're both thinking. Everyone in the hall knows it anyway. The bad year is 851. You lose 4 men to a storm in the Pentland Firth that you should have waited out but didn't because the window was closing. The decision was yours. The storm was not. The 4 men were both. You know this distinction is technical, and you apply it anyway because the alternative is a weight that cannot be carried and still function. Bjorn's son Knut has been sailing with you 3 years by then. He is not Bjorn. Nobody is Bjorn. But he rose in the same position, and has the same stillness under pressure his father had. And some mornings when the light is a certain way you see it in the set of his shoulders, and the accounting in your chest does something complicated. The Frankish coast changes in the 850s better walls. Organized resistance instead of panic at farmers. The raids get harder and more expensive. You lose more men per unit of silver than in the first decade. The mathematics are still workable, but trending in a direction you recognize. You sit with Knut and 2 senior men one night on the Seine, and talk about it plainly. The world is changing around what you do. It always changes eventually. The question is whether you change with it or keep running the same route until the route stops working, and then keep running it anyway. Nobody says the answer out loud. Everybody at that fire knows it. You go home that winter and stay. Not for the season. Astrid looks at you differently by March, when you haven't announced a spring departure. By May she understands something has shifted. She reorganizes the hall accounts to reflect a man who is present. She does this without ceremony. You watch her do it, and understand she has been prepared for this for 20 years, and was never certain it would come. Leif takes the fleet out in the spring. He is 22 and ready. You stand on the headland above the fjord, and watch the ships go the way your father stood in the tree line and watched his boat go. The difference is, you know where your ships are going, and the men in them chose to be there. You tell yourself this, and most of it is true. The hall is different when you are in it. Not bad. Different. The accounts are real, and the land is real, and the disputes between your tenants are real, and none of it has the quality of certainty that the sea has. On the sea you know what the dangers are. On land the dangers are smaller, and more numerous, and they come in through the door with familiar faces. Eric becomes a trader. Timber and iron and furs moving along the coast in a cargo ship he captains with your father's attention to weather. He comes home prosperous and undamaged. His children call you grandfather with an ease that takes some getting used to. Knut comes back from the Seine in autumn with his ships and a cut on his forearm healing cleanly. He gives you your share of the raid without being asked. A formality since you weren't there, but also a courtesy, and you understand the difference. He tells you about the season. You listen. You ask the right questions. You recognize in this conversation the exact shape of conversations you had with Sigurd 30 years ago. Some structures persist regardless of who occupies them. You are 51 years old. You have raided from the Faroe Islands to the Garonne. 43 named men lost over 30 years. The ledger is heavy, but it is carried. Silver enough that your grandchildren's grandchildren will not want. A son who trades, and a son who fights, and a wife who managed your absence for 2 decades with competence you have never adequately acknowledged out loud. Some mornings you stand on the headland and watch the channel, and you can feel the tide in your chest, the way you felt it at 16, the pull of it, the specific quality of the horizon when the wind is right, and the water is hard and flat, and the world resolves itself into the single clear question of where you're going, and how fast you can get there. You stand there and you feel it, and you walk back to the hall, not because the pull is gone, because you've learned the difference between a thing that is inside you and a thing that defines you. That difference takes a long time to become real. For some men it never does. They keep running the route until the route ends, and then they run it past the end. You've seen what that looks like. You've buried some of it on headlands, overlooking the sea. Astrid asks you once, late in a winter, what you think about when you stand up there in the morning. You think about it for a while. You tell her you think about the men in the ledger. She is quiet for a moment. Then she says she thinks you are still counting them. You say you probably always will. She puts her hand over yours on the table. Neither of you says anything more, and the fire does what fires do, and outside the wind is moving off the water, and it sounds the way it always sounds, and always will. That is a wrap. The story is fiction. The men who raided those coasts are not. From Lindisfarne in 793 to the rivers of Frankia, they reshaped the world in 2 generations. What they couldn't reshape was themselves. If this made you think, drop a comment. Subscribe for more.